AITA for refusing to accept family meetings because I'm tired of always paying for the whole family. When my partner and I first stepped into what would soon become our new home, it felt like all our hard work had finally paid off. We had spent years saving, budgeting, and carefully planning for this moment, and there it was, a beautiful 3-bedroom house with a massive kitchen, a sprawling living room, and a backyard that seemed to stretch on forever. It was the kind of place that begged to be filled with laughter, with memories, with life. We had always dreamed of a space like this, where we could host gatherings, bring our families together, and maybe even establish new traditions. We don't have kids, and we don't plan to, so our home was ours to mold, to create whatever life we wanted within its walls. I used to bartend, and I've always been someone who loves to entertain. There's something about bringing people together, about crafting the perfect cocktail or meal, that brings me joy. So, when Thanksgiving approached last year, it seemed only natural that I would volunteer to host. It was the first major holiday in our new home, and I wanted it to be special. I imagined our family gathered around the table, the house filled with the scent of roasting turkey and freshly baked pies, the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses echoing through the halls. It was a picture-perfect vision, and I was determined to bring it to life. When the day finally arrived, our home was transformed into a warm, inviting haven. The kitchen was a flurry of activity as I juggled multiple dishes, timing everything perfectly so that it would all come together just in time for dinner. The living room was set up with a cozy seating arrangement, and I had even put together a small bar area where I could mix drinks for our guests. The table was laid out with our best china, the centerpiece a beautiful arrangement of fall flowers that I had painstakingly chosen. As our family started to arrive, I could feel the excitement building. They marveled at the house, complimenting us on how we had made it our own. The compliments flowed just as freely as the wine and cocktails, and I found myself slipping back into my old bartending persona, crafting drinks with a flourish and making sure everyone was taken care of. Dinner was a success, the food was delicious, and the conversation was lively. There was laughter, there were stories, and there was that unmistakable feeling of togetherness that makes holidays like Thanksgiving so special. By the end of the night, as the last of our guests said their goodbyes and the house grew quiet, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Hosting Thanksgiving had been everything I had hoped for and more. It was a lot of work, but it was worth it to see everyone so happy, to know that I had created a memorable experience for my family. I was tired, yes, but it was the good kind of tired, the kind that comes from a day well spent. But as the weeks turned into months, I began to realize that Thanksgiving had set a precedent. With Christmas just around the corner, my family naturally assumed that we would host again. After all, our home was the perfect gathering spot, and we had proven that we could handle it. I didn't mind if first Christmas was another opportunity to bring everyone together, and I still had that hosting high from Thanksgiving. So, we dove into the preparations once again. Christmas was even more elaborate than Thanksgiving. There were gifts to buy and wrap, a tree to decorate, and an even more ambitious menu to plan. I spent days baking cookies, making candy, and preparing a feast that would make even Santa jealous. We hosted a Christmas Eve dinner and a Christmas Day brunch, and once again, our home was filled with the warmth and joy of the season. But after Christmas, things started to shift. My mom's birthday was in February, and once again, our home was the chosen venue. This time, I felt a twinge of reluctance. We had just hosted 2 major holidays back to back, and I was starting to feel the strain. But I pushed those feelings aside and threw myself into planning her birthday celebration. It was a smaller gathering, but still required a lot of effort: decorating, cooking, cleaning. By the time her birthday was over, I was exhausted. As the year progressed, it became clear that our home had become the default location for all family gatherings. Easter, Memorial Day, 4th of July, every holiday, every birthday, every family event was held at our place. And with each gathering, the burden grew heavier. It wasn't just the time and energy it took to plan, cook, and clean up after these events, it was the financial strain as well. Hosting wasn't cheap. We were spending hundreds, sometimes thousands, of dollars on food, drinks, decorations, and then hiring cleaners afterward because the mess was just too much for us to handle alone. Sure, some family members would chip in here and there, but the bulk of the responsibility always fell on my partner and me. And while everyone else got to relax and enjoy the gatherings, I was constantly on my feet, making sure everything ran smoothly. I was the one who was up at dawn, starting the prep work, and the last one to go to bed, after the house was finally quiet and the last dish was washed. My partner helped where he could, but I knew he was starting to feel the strain too. Our weekends were consumed by these events, leaving little time for us to enjoy our own space, to unwind, to do the things we loved. The financial burden also started to weigh heavily on us. Yes, we both earn well, but that doesn't mean we want to spend a significant portion of our income on hosting duties. We have our own goals and dreams, saving for retirement, traveling, maybe even starting a small side business, and spending so much on these gatherings was starting to feel like a drain on our resources. But more than that, it was the time we could have spent together, exploring new places, trying new things, or just enjoying a quiet weekend at home, time that was now being consumed by the never-ending cycle of family gatherings. The final straw came as Thanksgiving started to approach again this year. The memories of last year's holiday were still fresh in my mind, the excitement, the joy, the satisfaction. But this time, instead of feeling eager to host, I felt a deep sense of dread. I couldn't do it anymore, not like this. The thought of going through all that effort again, of spending weeks planning, cooking, and cleaning, only to have our home invaded by the chaos of another family gathering, it was too much. One Sunday afternoon, I decided to talk to them about it during a family video call. It had become a tradition for us to check in with each other every weekend, to catch up on life, and to plan for upcoming events. My mom, my siblings, a couple of cousins, they were all there, laughing and chatting as we went over the details for Thanksgiving. "So, we'll be at your place again, right?" my mom asked, her tone light and casual, as if it were a foregone conclusion. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to say. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you all about that," I began, my voice a bit shaky. "We've been hosting a lot of gatherings this past year: Thanksgiving, Christmas, Mom's birthday, Easter, Memorial Day, 4th of July. It's been wonderful having everyone over, but it's starting to become a bit overwhelming for us." There was a pause, a brief silence on the other end of the line as my words hung in the air. I could see the puzzled expressions on their faces, the slight furrow of brows as they processed what I was saying. "What do you mean?" my mom finally asked, her voice tinged with confusion. "I mean, it's a lot of work to host all these events," I explained, trying to keep my tone calm and even. "The planning, the cooking, the cleaning, it's really starting to take a toll on us. And financially, it's a big strain too. We're spending a lot of money on food, drinks, decorations, and then we have to hire cleaners afterward because it's just too much for us to handle on our own." I paused, hoping that they would understand, that they would see where I was coming from. But instead of sympathy or understanding, what I got was laughter. "You're joking, right?" my brother chuckled, shaking his head. "You've got the biggest house out of all of us. It's perfect for a family holiday. What's a little work compared to that?" "Yeah, and you're so good at it," my cousin chimed in, smiling. "Everything always turns out amazing when you host. We all look forward to it." I felt my heart sink. They weren't taking me seriously. They thought I was exaggerating, that I was making a big deal out of nothing. I glanced over at my partner, who gave me a reassuring nod, silently encouraging me to stand my ground. "It's not just a little work," I insisted, my voice firming up. "It's a lot of work. And it's not just the time and effort, it's the cost too. We've been spending hundreds, sometimes thousands, of dollars on these gatherings. We love having you all over, but we need a break. We can't keep doing this for every holiday, every birthday. It's too much." Again, there was that awkward silence. I could see the confusion turning into irritation on their faces, as if they couldn't quite comprehend why I was making this an issue. My mom finally spoke up, her tone less jovial and more serious. "Honey, I understand it's a lot of work, but we're family. We help each other out. And you and your partner don't have kids, so it's easier for you. The rest of us have our own challenges, you know." I felt a flash of frustration at her words. Yes, we don't have kids, but that didn't mean our time and energy were any less valuable. It didn't mean we were free to be the default hosts for every single event, but I could see where this was going. My family had convinced themselves that our circumstances made us the best candidates to host, and they weren't going to let go of that belief easily. "I know everyone has their own challenges," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But that doesn't mean we can keep doing this alone. That's why I'm suggesting we rotate hosting duties. That way, everyone shares the load, and no one has to carry it all by themselves. Or, if that's too complicated, we could meet at a restaurant or a rented space. That way, we can still be together without putting all the pressure on one household." My brother rolled his eyes. "Come on, we all know it's easier at your place. You've got the space, the kitchen, the setup. Why make it more complicated than it needs to be?" "Yeah, and eating out isn't the same," my cousin added. "It doesn't have the same feeling, you know, it's not as personal." I was starting to feel like I was banging my head against a wall. No matter how I tried to explain it, they weren't willing to see things from my perspective. It was as if they had already made up their minds that hosting was my responsibility, and any attempt to change that was just me being difficult. The tension in the air was thick after that conversation. My family had made it clear that they weren't thrilled with the idea of rotating hosting duties, and despite my best efforts to explain how overwhelmed we were, it seemed like they still didn't fully grasp just how much work went into hosting every single holiday and gathering. I was mentally and emotionally drained, and I knew that my partner felt the same way. Yet, even after all that, I could tell that they weren't going to let this go. The unspoken expectation lingered, heavy and oppressive, like a dark cloud hanging over us. A few days later, I received the confirmation I had been dreading, a group text from my mom announcing that the next holiday celebration, Thanksgiving, no less, would be held at our house. My heart sank when I read the message, a mix of frustration and resignation settling in my chest. "We've all talked it over," the message read, "and we think it's best to keep Thanksgiving at your place. We'll all help out more this time, I promise. We can't wait to be together." The words stung more than they should have. It wasn't that I didn't want to be with my family. I loved them deeply, despite our differences, but I felt like they were completely ignoring everything I had said. It was as if my concerns and boundaries had been brushed aside, dismissed as nothing more than a passing inconvenience. I showed the message to my partner, who read it with a frown. "They're not listening," he said, stating the obvious. "I know," I sighed, sinking into the couch beside him. "I don't know what else to do. They're just so set on this idea that we're the default hosts because we don't have kids. It's like they think our time and energy don't count as much." He wrapped an arm around me, pulling me close. "We could just say no," he suggested, "flat out refuse." I considered it, but I knew that would only lead to more tension, more arguments. My family was stubborn, and they weren't going to back down easily. Plus, part of me was afraid of the fallout. What if they really did get angry with me? What if it caused a rift between us? "I think I have a better idea," I said after a moment, an idea forming in my mind. "They want Thanksgiving at our place, fine, but I'm not going to cook anything. If they want to use our house, they can handle everything else themselves." He raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "You sure about that? They might not take it well." "I'm sure," I replied, determination hardening in my chest. "They need to understand that hosting isn't just about having a big house, it's about all the work that goes into it. Maybe if they see what it's like to show up and have nothing prepared, they'll finally get it." And so, that was the plan. I would host Thanksgiving, but I wouldn't lift a finger to prepare anything. No cleaning, no cooking, no setting the table. It was a risky move, but I felt like it was the only way to make my point. I needed to show them that hosting wasn't as effortless as they seemed to think. The days leading up to Thanksgiving were filled with a strange mix of anticipation and anxiety. My family continued to send messages, casually asking if I needed help with anything or if I had planned out the menu yet. Each time, I responded with vague, non-committal answers, doing my best to deflect their questions. It was clear that they assumed everything would be just like it always was, an elaborate feast, a beautifully decorated home, and all the trimmings that made our gatherings so special. But I wasn't budging. I refused to get caught up in the same old routine. This year, they were going to learn what it felt like to take things for granted. Thanksgiving morning arrived, and for the first time in years, I woke up without the usual sense of dread. There was no rush to get the turkey in the oven, no frantic scramble to prepare side dishes, no stress over setting the table just right. I felt oddly calm, knowing that I had done exactly what I said I would do: nothing. My partner and I spent the morning lounging around the house, enjoying the peace and quiet. We made ourselves a simple breakfast, watched some TV, and even went for a walk. It felt almost surreal, like we were getting a glimpse of what a truly relaxing holiday could be like. By the time my family started arriving in the early afternoon, I could see the confusion on their faces. They walked in, expecting to be greeted by the usual warm, inviting smells of Thanksgiving dinner, but instead, they were met with nothing. The kitchen was quiet, the dining room table was bare, and there wasn't a single dish in sight. Where's the food?" my brother asked, looking around as if he had missed something obvious. I gave him a casual shrug. "I didn't make anything." He stared at me, clearly waiting for the punchline. "What do you mean you didn't make anything? It's Thanksgiving." "I know," I replied, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. "But I told you I needed a break, so I didn't cook." The realization began to dawn on the rest of my family as they took in the scene. My mom looked particularly flustered, her eyes darting around the room, as if trying to figure out how this had all gone so wrong. "Honey, you were joking, right?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "You didn't make anything at all." "Nope," I said, shaking my head. "I meant what I said. If you all want to use our house, that's fine. But I'm not cooking this year. I needed a break, remember?" There was a stunned silence as they processed what I had just said. My brother exchanged a look with my cousin, and I could see the frustration building in his eyes. "So, what are we supposed to do now?" he asked, his voice rising with irritation. "We've got no food, no nothing. How are we supposed to have Thanksgiving?" I could feel the tension thickening in the room, but I refused to back down. "I don't know," I said, crossing my arms. "But I'm sure you'll figure something out. There's a grocery store down the street if you want to pick up some supplies, or you could order takeout. Whatever works for you." My mom looked like she was on the verge of tears, clearly overwhelmed by the situation. "I can't believe this," she muttered, shaking her head. "This isn't like you. You've always been the one to bring us all together." I felt a pang of guilt at her words, but I pushed it aside. I knew that if I caved now, nothing would ever change. My family needed to understand that they couldn't keep expecting me to shoulder all the responsibility without any consideration for how it affected me. "I'm sorry if this is upsetting," I said, my voice softening slightly, "but I needed to do this. I needed you all to see what it's like when I'm not the one taking care of everything." There was a long, uncomfortable pause as my family absorbed my words. Finally, my brother let out an exasperated sigh. "Fine," he said, clearly annoyed. "Let's just go get some food. We'll figure it out." The next hour was a chaotic scramble as my family piled into their cars and headed to the grocery store. They returned with bags of pre-made dishes, rotisserie chickens, and whatever else they could find on such short notice. It was a far cry from our usual elaborate spread, but it was better than nothing. As they rushed to throw everything together, I watched from the sidelines, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. Part of me was relieved that I had finally taken a stand, that I had forced them to see what it was like to be in my shoes, but another part of me felt a deep sense of loss. This wasn't the Thanksgiving I had envisioned, and it wasn't the holiday I wanted for my family. When everything was finally ready, we all sat down to eat. The mood was tense, the atmosphere heavy with unspoken frustration. The food was decent, but it lacked the warmth and care that usually went into our meals. My family ate in relative silence, clearly still processing what had happened. After dinner, as we were cleaning up, my mom pulled me aside. She looked tired, her expression a mix of disappointment and concern. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice soft. "I didn't realize how much pressure we were putting on you. We've gotten so used to you being the one to handle everything. I guess we took it for granted." I felt a lump form in my throat at her words, but I managed to keep my emotions in check. "I know, Mom," I replied. "But I couldn't keep doing it all by myself. I needed you all to see that." She nodded, her eyes filled with a mixture of understanding and regret. "We'll figure something out for next time," she said. "But I hope next time, you won't do this again. It was really hard on everyone. Next time, we need to have a real conversation about how we're going to handle these gatherings," I said, my voice firm. "I'm not going to go back to the way things were. If we're going to keep celebrating together, we all need to share the responsibility. Otherwise, I'm not hosting again. Not like this." She looked at me for a long moment, as if searching for something in my expression. Finally, she sighed and gave a small nod. "Okay," she said quietly. "We'll talk about it." As we finished cleaning up and everyone started to leave, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. It hadn't been the perfect solution, but it was a start. My family had been forced to confront the reality of what hosting meant, and while they hadn't fully accepted it yet, I knew that I had made my point. The next few weeks were filled with a strange tension. My family was clearly still processing what had happened, and I could sense that they were trying to figure out how to move forward. I received a few messages here and there, tentative offers to host future gatherings or suggestions to meet at a neutral location. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. As the next holiday approached, I braced myself for the inevitable conversation. I knew my family would be looking to me for answers, for guidance on what to do next, but this time, I was ready. I had learned that sometimes, in order to make a change, you had to be willing to stand your ground even if it meant disappointing the people you love. When the text finally came, asking what the plan was for the holiday, I took a deep breath and replied, "Let's talk." We need to figure out a new plan, together. So here I am, caught between the desire to please my family and the need to protect my own well-being. AITA for refusing to host family gatherings anymore. For wanting to share the load, to reclaim our time and our space. It's a difficult position to be in, and I never thought it would come to this.
Thank you for watching this video. Make sure to like the video and subscribe for more videos like this. Until we meet again.